Okay. Any questions?
Francis, I have a few questions to ask you. The first one is, what's the difference between limited consciousness and unlimited consciousness?
No. Limited consciousness would be a consciousness, for instance, which is dependent upon the body, which dies when the body dies. Or that would be dependent upon anything else. Whereas unlimited consciousness is a consciousness which is autonomous, absolute, not limited by time and space, therefore non-localized either in time or in space.
So it's the same as unlimited consciousness? Is the same thing?
When I use the word unlimited consciousness, I mean absolutely unlimited, meaning unlimited as far as the eye can see and further. In all possible dimensions, in all possible respects.
So when the body, mind, and the brain fades away, and the limited consciousness absorbs into unlimited consciousness, and
the current consciousness, which is hearing these words, is already the unlimited consciousness. That's the big secret, if you will. That's the open secret. Our problem is that we believe it to be limited. And we believe that it is limited, for instance, that it is mortal or dependent upon the body or dependent upon a limited mind or a limited soul. We believe that without, in fact, any experiential evidence in support of this belief. So most people believe there is plenty of evidence in support of that belief, so they believe that it is a fact, because they have not really investigated the evidence they believe to have. So the investigation is simply asking the question, okay, how do I know that consciousness is limited if I believe it to be the case? How do I know? You know? What is it that allows me to say that? And then we'll discover then there is nothing that authorizes us to believe that.
And also I have another question, and that's when the body-mind fades. When the body-mind fades and the brain fades and our experiences, whatever we accomplished in this limited time, it will fade completely and nothing will remain.
Speak into the mic, please, because I cannot hear you.
Oh, I was saying that when the brain and the body-mind fades, the experience, all the memories will fade also.
Yes.
Then what about that we have limited time living in this world and trying to get the truth about ourselves, our happiness and experiences, all this will fade away and nothing will left. As for instance, our ancestors die and we won't have any, everything will fade away. It's just, I don't understand, how is this?
When you wake up in the morning, the world in your dream falls away.
I'm sorry.
When you wake up in the morning, the world that was present in your dream falls away. You don't.
I see.
Our problem is that we believe that without the world, we would be miserable. That we would get bored to death. Which is not an issue because we are already dead. You see? So, whereas in fact it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. Is that what we really love, what we really don't want to get separated from, is what we are. And that we'll never get separate from it. And we will never be separate from peace, happiness, and completion. Plenitude, if you will, or fullness. So that we are separated from it only insofar as we believe to be dependent on an external world. All it takes is to really experience the true nature of happiness. To see clearly that happiness is not delivered by or stored in this world. The happiness is never the experience of something in the world, never the experience of the world. The experience of happiness is always the experience of our real identity, of our intimacy, which is love, which is peace. So, but we are so attached to the world, because we hold on to it for dear life. And also, some of us perceive death as absolute nothingness. Others believe the death of the body is not the end of the soul, and then the soul is going to have an even harder time in the beyond and get a lot of retribution for whatever actions have been taken. So all of that, in both cases there is fear. But it should be easy to understand that absolute nothingness doesn't exist. Absolute nothingness is an impossibility.
So we will exist somewhere.
That which is, always will be. In other words, that which really is our real being will always be. So we are not going to lose what we are, our reality. We are going to lose a dream, which we can recreate at will if we want. In addition to that, but what's the point of doing the same thing again? Been there, done that, says God.
So the soul will appear in another.
Just make sure that you are hearing yourself, that you are constantly hearing yourself through the speakers. Don't think of the direction of the mic, but the feedback from the speakers, and then you'll be fine. We will all be fine.
Yeah. So I want to know that after death, our soul will appear appear in another body? Or
You do whatever you want.
okay.
If you want to appear in another body, why not? Because you will realize that you have always been doing what you wanted. So it's not like something is going to happen to you that you don't want, because you are the boss. You are the CEO. So you cannot be fired.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Francis. I feel like I have a related comment or question. A few days ago, I had a lot of joy come out of nowhere.
You had what?
A lot of joyfulness come out of nowhere, and I saw that it was related to a transformation of my fear of death, and that it seemed like that I was no more afraid of disappearing. So that made me very happy, but I saw that there was some residual fear about being attached to the human experience. And I was wondering if you had any comment on how to transcend that.
The moment it is clear to us that our reality is eternal, there is no need to transcend anything, because it is also natural for the body, mind, to preserve itself. It is built, it is wired that way. So we have to be also a good manager of the body-mind, and there is no need to go against this instinct of preservation, to force the machine in a direction it is not being designed for. But at the same time, we know that our understanding that reality is eternal, that our reality is eternal, of course, overrides this natural instinct of the body for preservation. So it is not an either-or situation, it's both. We are the manager of the body, but ultimately we don't die when the body dies. The body is our vehicle. What we mistakenly believe to be attachment to the body may simply be the natural instinct for the body to survive. You see, and that's natural. There is nothing wrong with that.
I feel like that it was more so about I love to have parents and friends, and the way that perhaps the human body perceives the world.
That's different. Then if it is attachment to the world, if it is but even that, It is normal to be attached to the human experience, but knowing that ultimately it is a game we are playing. It's like when you play the game of tennis, you play as if you would be fighting for your life, more or less. But at the same time, you know you are not. You see? But you play the game. And you play the game because you enjoy playing the game. So we play the game of being human as long as we enjoy playing the game of being human. It's not in opposition, or it's not an either or. Like, I have to be attached to the body, or I have to be attached to my true nature. Because this type of dilemma would appear only if body and true nature were on the same level of reality. You see? It's like a child playing Indians and cowboys, saying, am I attached more to my mother or to Pecos Bill? Pecos Bill. They are too young. To the character I play when I play cowboys and Indians. It's a false question. Why I play the game of I am attached to the character, but I full well know where my love goes as a child.
Thank you.
Okay. There are questions from not too many. Okay, yes, I think it's yesterday. Mary asked, when the question arises, am I doing what I really want to be doing in that moment? It sometimes feels a bit self-indulgent, however, most of the time it feels good. Maybe some leftover Catholic upbringing, guilt lingering. This Irish. Yeah. Is the idea to keep with the flow rather than have a resistance towards it? Yes, but we have to understand what it means to keep with the flow. What it means is to act and to think from an impersonal vantage point, from the consciousness place. Because that may involve struggle. There might be such a thing as impersonal struggle. Therefore, it doesn't imply cowardice. It doesn't imply giving up as adverse circumstances arise. No. So sometimes the impersonal action may very much feel like resistance. And the opposite is also true, that sometimes an action that feels like apparently not resisting, going with the flow, is in fact going to come from ignorance. So the actions have to be evaluated from within. And does this action arise out of the belief to be a separate human being? Or does it arise as an experiment in which we try to act as if consciousness were universal? So that's really the determination that we have to make. And if it is the latter, then that would be what I call flowing, being in the flow, being in the moment, flowing with the universe. Because sometimes, although the universe without is telling us it would be easy to go that way, the universe within is telling us, hell no, don't do that, you see. So we have to find out what the universe is suggesting at any given moment, and that would be being with the flow. Emric, I know that I am consciousness and have a solid understanding and intuition that consciousness is universal. At least this is my impression. It has already liberated some tensions inside my body-mind. More and more my thoughts are directed towards the truth without effort. But when I stand at the position of the perceiver and not as ignorance, I only perceive strong resistances in my body and my mind. I do not experience peace. Then I am trying to go beyond that, but I cannot. Is it normal? And shall I just persevere? Shall I, for example, abide more as consciousness in silence? I cannot follow my enthusiasm because I have no real enthusiasm. The only enthusiasm I have is to follow my intelligence, which tells me to seek the truth. But that's beautiful, that's enthusiasm for the truth. And I do it without really understanding why I am doing it. Because of desperation, maybe. I hope not. Well, there is a way to find out whether you are doing it as out of desperation. Because when we do something out of desperation, because we want to get rid of desperation, usually whatever we do in this case is not that pleasant. It adds usually to our misery. It's more toiling, more work, more effort. But we hope that this effort will ultimately pay off and pull us out of our misery. Then if whatever you are doing, you discover that as you are doing it, I'm talking about the self-enquiry, the investigation. If you already experience enthusiasm at doing it, in enthusiasm there is some joyfulness already. In other words, you're being pulled out of desperation. It's not something that is going to be happening at the end of the path, of the effort, but it has to be, the payoff has to be immediate. Not immediate in this sense that you will go into an immediate samadhi, but immediate in this sense that you will be very certain at that moment that you are following your enthusiasm. Meaning that's what you want to do at this moment, that there is no resistance. And the moment we follow our enthusiasm, we are with the flow, we are in the flow, in the impersonal flow. So that's for you to find out. Whatever you do, as you say, without really understanding why you are doing it, try to understand whether that which you are doing already brings some element of causeless joy into your life. So we discover at some point that, when you read a book about the truth, on when you set aside some time for meditation or yoga or whatever it is that you are doing, that already before you do it, it's like you are going to a form of celebration. You are going to a party. You see, that would be a clear sign that you are following your enthusiasm. Otherwise, don't do it. Everything we do with a lack of interest is going to be sterile. It's better to go to the fridge and have some ice cream or a beer. Now, you say, when I stand at the position of the perceiver and not as ignorance, I only perceive strong resistances in my body and my mind. I do not experience peace. I would ask myself, what is it that you call to stand at the position of the perceiver? I would try to find out whether there is the implicit assumption that I am a human perceiver, in which case the position of the perceiver is still ignorant. To take your stand as consciousness should be done with the full intent to conduct an experiment into the universe, the possibility that consciousness be universal. So that's, otherwise, chances are you are going to take your stand at someone who is doing some practice, some meditation, trying to get some happiness, some peace, some state, instead of coming from this vantage point, I am fully open that this conscious to the possibility that this consciousness is universal. And stick to this. Be aware when you abandon this position, because that may happen very quickly in the beginning. The point is to get established firmly in this position. What happens in most cases is that we take this stand, and 1 second later we go back to believing to be a separate individual, seeking some relief, etc. And then we complain, oh, meditation doesn't work. You talk about happiness and peace, and I'm not experiencing it. You see? But over time, this moment when we take truly our stand as consciousness, when we conduct this type of experiment with goodwill, in an honest fashion, they will have a cumulative effect. And we will notice that in the globality of our life, something has changed. And something has changed that in terms of peace, of inner peace and happiness. But the result is not a result that appears, I do this and baff, there is that. It doesn't appear when we do the thing. Although yes, it is there also in the form of peace, because the peace is in this enthusiasm, in this interest. But then, having been there, having had some fleeting experience of causeless peace, then we will notice that this causeless peace begins to be in the background of all of our thoughts, activities. But then it's a change in our life which is not a temporary change. It's a global change. It's something which is always present in the background, no matter what happens on the foreground. It's a global change. It's a shift that has taken place globally. It's not a shift that takes place really at a point in time and then disappears. It's something that has kind of always been present. Hard to describe. There's a beautiful poem by our friend Yelena. She unveiled it for us during the last retreat. So I'm going to read it for those who are not there. They tell me of exotic temples in faraway lands and wandering sages. They tell me of crystal clear rivers and breathtaking cliffs. They tell me of vibrant cities full of art and songs. But I belong to you, my ocean. I love how you kiss my feet when I first come to you, the way you gently hug every inch of my body, the way your waves ride me. No song is more beautiful than your whisper. And let others travel to faraway lands, to crystal clear rivers, sit at the feet of the sages searching for wisdom. I belong to you, my ocean. Your salt is in my hair, your salt is on my lips, your salt is in my heart. And When I am no more, I want to be your salt, my ocean. Any questions?
Just a short question. When you had this, when this global change happened for you, and you were in your life, did you notice, like, when you went back to work from your retreat with your teacher?
What?
When you went back to work, to your career with your, did the people around you notice anything? Was it very subtle?
Yes, I guess some people notice when you come, when you are, there is a presence about you that some people are sensitive to. I was staying with my teacher in Switzerland in the mountains in a cottage, and once a week we would go to the city, to Montreux, to buy the food. And I was there with a German friend, Runa. And we go to the bakery and we buy a lot of bread for the entire week for the house. And as the moment to pay comes, the lady, she didn't want us to pay. In Switzerland. In Switzerland. So she had been touched. I mean, we were young, handsome, but... no, something, she saw something, she wouldn't accept any money. Things happen like that. And yes, also what happens in the beginning, you come out after a retreat like that, you have this shine, this perfume with you, you feel it, you're in the plane, or and then it seems to dissipate over time. Then the homework is to be able to find it again on your own.
You mentioned doing experiments to, like assuming that consciousness is universal and then
Yes.
acting as that. But there's like situations where, coming from the idea that consciousness is universal, it might suggest the same action as...
Yes.
And so like
Definitely.
So how do you approach that to...
In this case, there is no experiment that is possible. Not simple, because there is no way to discriminate. If the line of action or of thought would be the same whether consciousness is universal or not. The example I gave you, you are on the freeway driving and the gauge of your tank leads up. So whether you are in ignorance or in wisdom, the thought that comes to you is to stop by at the next exit and to fill up, right? So in this case, it's not an experiment that enables you to make the determination.
Okay, I was thinking of like an example where, someone needs a ride, and so like thinking like, well, consciousness being universal, like I should give them a ride, or also like I was raised Christian, and so, I feel like I should give them a ride because, that's something that God would want you to do. And so like, in that situation, like, is there a way to like just have a mindset that makes it an experiment, even though you might do the same action?
Or this unshaved and apparently stinky hitchhiker on the edge of the... I don't want to give him a ride, you know. That might be the impersonal decision.
Thank you.
We cannot say ahead of time. There is no book of recipes telling us what the impersonal action is going to be like. And it has always to be defined in context, in the situation. And all that matters is to do our best effort to make the impersonal decision. Even if eventually it seems to have been the wrong decision. But if at the moment of making the decision, we made this good faith effort to the best of our knowledge to act impersonally, that will be an impersonal action and decision. And conversely, a decision may have been fully appropriate and apparently in hindsight, intelligent, but in the moment, if a personal motive was in it, you know, it is not going to be an impersonal decision. So the moment we understand that, it becomes easy. All we have to do is to do our best in any given situation. And by the way, that's an important, that's the beauty of this path, is that it leads to a very clear definition of ethics. What is ethical? What is ethical behavior? If you think about it, philosophers, in most cases, they come to grips with this problem. What is the right action? And it's very difficult because usually it ends up with some form of religion. It ends up with some book somewhere, or a big stone with, you see what I mean, and some holy book, some big stone, something like that, with the do's and don'ts, right? That you have to follow blindly or else. Yeah? But they are not appropriate to all circumstances. You know, that's a problem. And then if they are not appropriate to all circumstances, how do I decide? Because there is still this margin. So then, for instance, thou shalt not kill. Okay? Well, there are circumstances where it may be interesting to kill. You see, let's take the police chief. There is a terrorist taking hostages, you know, in a place, right? And he's killing one person per minute, right? And there are 100 hostages in this room. And the SWAT team has a clear shot at the guy, the sniper. What is the police chief going to say? Hey, shoot the hell this guy, right? And that's the impersonal action, right? But what about thou shalt not kill? You see, so even the second problem, which is found with these codes of ethics, is that they cannot take into account all situations, and that there are always determinations to be made, and the question remains, how do we make them? And there is no answer to that. You see, so first There is no rational, no clear indication of where it comes from. I mean, this guy went, to the plateau there, and there was a bush that was really shiny, and out of the bush, a voice. I mean, that's a story for the kids. And I mean, it may have happened. You see, but I mean, I'm not saying, no, that's not what I'm saying. But you cannot see that as you cannot build really a philosophy on that. Whereas here, the beauty of it is that what to do is not predefined, but you are given the recipe to do it. In other words, it's an operational definition of ethics. And that's all that matters. Because ethics, which is not operational, which is purely intellectual, who cares? You know? Because the real question of ethics is, what should I do? Right? So it's by essence operational. If it is purely intellectual, we don't care at all. So it's all that matters. Same thing, for instance, with the definition of consciousness that I use. It's operational in that sense that I say consciousness is whatever it is, the reality that is hearing these words right now. Okay. It doesn't refer to a circular definition like you find in the dictionary. You go to consciousness, awareness. You go to awareness, consciousness. You see? Because it doesn't relate to experience. It's a word, a concept, relating to another concept. So sometimes it's smarter than that. You see, okay, what does concept mean? Then you go on, idea. Then what does idea mean? Notion. What does notion mean? Concept. You see? So they take you for a little walk, but then at the end of the day, you're stuck.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey. I think what's happened in my case, starting on the path, I feel like there's a misunderstanding with being passive. I feel generally that if I seek to resolve a problem, I'm never really resolving it, because so long as there is even the idea that I can resolve something, I'm already in the wrong. So you were talking about how it can be sort of a cowardice kind of thing. I feel like that happens sometimes.
What makes you feel that? I'm not saying that each problem has a solution. Each problem will eventually find its solution, but we are not going to find the solution to every problem. But some problems have a solution. That's all I'm saying. That's true in life. Like the problem, I'm running out of fuel. Houston, we are having a problem here. So I stopped at the next station. No more problem. Unless I drive a Tesla. So there are problems that have solutions. So the problem we are talking about here, it's the problem, right? The mother of all problems. What makes you feel that this problem doesn't have a solution?
I think there is a solution. I'm certainly trying to find it. But I'm referring more like in daily life, like problems that are like family problems, for example, I may try to, to think of what you say and try to do the impersonal thing. A lot of the times I just don't know. Like you said, the outside may feel fine.
But if you understood what I said that it doesn't matter, because all that matters is that you do your best to find a solution, to find the impersonal solution. That's all.
But shouldn't the impersonal solution be what's best for everyone? Everyone involved?
Yes, what is ultimately the best for everyone.
So sometimes
It doesn't mean pleasing or giving up to the desires of everyone. It's not that. If your child who is 4 years old is telling you, Dad, let me cross the road on my own, the dad is going to say no. He's not going to say yes to the desire of the child. Now when the child is 6 or 7, so that's okay, I'm going to teach you how to do it. You look to the left, then to the right, unless you're in Shropshire, and then you... Yeah, there is something in physics called the parity principle. There are a kind of reverse image over there.
So I'm not very smart, so.
No, that was for the guy behind you.
Okay.
A CPT violation.
So I guess the confusion is there are certain things that I would, like you said, that it feels right, that the outside may seems easy, but inside, internally, feels like it is the opposite. Seems like resistance, but still feels right. But then when I look at others who I don't live alone, and I feel it's almost like a selfish thing that I am seeking to sort of please myself at the cost of others, and that's not right. I shouldn't do that, because so it always comes to, once all this dilemma, all the trying to figure it out, really in the end it just comes down to, this is only because I don't understand, because I don't have the
answer. Let me give you a personal example. When I fell in love with the truth, my parents were very unhappy, because I was moving out of their religion of atheism, so I was an apostate, right? So the question is, should I have, in order to please them, not become a truth seeker, not spend time with my teacher? And no. So I didn't have to please them, and I didn't. If they felt that I was provoking them, it was their problem. I wasn't trying to convert them either. So what is good for the goose is good for the gander. I was in human relationship, there should be symmetry, reciprocity. You see, you respect the freedom of others, but you expect them to respect your freedom. You see, otherwise you are put in a straitjacket, and being in this straitjacket, you will be very unhappy, and somehow this unhappiness and this desire for freedom in you will translate into subliminal messages that you are going to send, that are not going to please them anyway. You see what I mean? In other words, if you try to please people by doing something which is not impersonal, they are never going to be happy.
Yes.
So it's better to do what your freedom is telling you to do, and their being unhappy about it is going to give them a possibility to move out of their box. Because people put you in a box. We do that all the time. We put people in the box. The moment we unbox them is when we see them as consciousness. Because then consciousness can go to any direction at any moment. You see? So we don't have any expectation because we don't know. So if we take people as consciousness, we give them their freedom. The problem is that an animal who has been in a cage for a long time, and when you open the door, they are afraid of moving out of the cage. You see? So often people, even when you try to suck them out of their cage, they are afraid, they don't want to.
Yes.
Anyway, I've said many things here, but the goal is not to please people. To please others is not the impersonal behavior. To be unpleasant to others is not the impersonal behavior either. The impersonal action has nothing to do with pleasing or being unpleasant. It is going to be whatever it is, but you make the determination from your heart center that it is, as far as you know, impersonal.
Yes. And so long as the investigation is going on, because it just like everything just like seems so complicated sometimes. Just life in general, just living in general. Do you feel that as so long as there is the investigation, things can just resolve themselves, rather than me try to, make things happen kind of thing?
No. You know, there is this saying by Francis, do your best and let God do the rest. But do your best first. I'm not preaching passivity. Do your best. We are in the world to play the game, to act. What? Is that new? Perhaps the battery over there. It must be his battery. Is good there? So that's his battery. Problem solving, you see some problem.
So even when you give up the world, even when you give up the world in the mind, it's the same thing. It doesn't change anything. There's still a sort of making decisions, because that at least this is the assumption. The assumption that is with me is that the main problem to resolve is that I am not the one making the decisions, and so long as I give up the world in the mind, then these things will just resolve, and I will not need to make any decisions. So this is not the case. That things will just come to me somehow.
Yeah, but that's when you do your best to make the impersonal decision, so the impersonal decision is going to come to you.
And that's the same as giving up, essentially, you would say?
It's giving up being a separate person. It's not giving up acting. It's giving up acting and deciding as a separate person, which is not the same. then the body-mind becomes an instrument through which the impersonal flows. It appears as a decision in the mind and as an impersonal action through the body.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't exclude acting. Acting.
Making decisions.
No, and doing.
Yes. Thank you.
Not acting. Hollywood. No. How do you say? Acting also. Yeah.
Do we have time?
Please, please, please.
It's only a few years ago that I thought anyone that believed in God was a bit of an idiot because I guess like your parents, I thought that science had all the answers. And, this pursuit of truth led me to read, a fascinating book on quantum theory written by hardcore physicists that actually don't give any credit to someone like you with some possible answers. And it fascinated me to discover that, not only is it a theory, but it is the most successful scientific theory that's ever been, to my knowledge. It's been around for 100 years. It's never been proven wrong. It's the theory in which all physics is based on, and yet I've never heard of it. It's not taught in school. However, if you take the implications of quantum theory seriously, it denies my understanding, the existence of a physical world outside of observation. And it just, I can't imagine asking a better person this question. A, how come I've never heard of it? Why it's not taught in schools? And I guess in some circles, there is a debate among scientists, about, is the world real, or, it's not as real as we think. And it clearly bothered Einstein. I think it drove him crazy. If I read between the lines of this book, where, he half jokingly said to a fellow physicist, I'd like to think that the moon is there even when I'm not looking at it. So my question is, when is society, Western culture, going to start debating the implications of a quantum theory seriously? Do you see that happening?
I don't know how to answer. There are many questions. Why is it not taught in school? Because to properly understand it, it requires some mathematical materials that are a little too advanced for high school level. I remember when I was in high school, it was in the chemistry class that they were introducing the various quantum numbers, the spin, the S, I don't remember, SPM, etc. That explains the Mendeleev classification of elements. But it was taught like you have to learn that by memory and without any real explanation. So it was like a course in religion. It was not until much later that I came to grips with the real equations and the real thing. So that's the reason. The reason is that whereas classical physics has a very easy geometrical representation, because of the 3 dimensions of space and then time, the space that are being used in quantum mechanics are much more complex. Their dimensions are very different. There is the use of complex numbers. So it's too complicated for young kids. So that's the answer to that. The second thing is that quantum mechanics doesn't imply that the world doesn't exist in the absence of observation. That would be one interpretation. The problem with quantum mechanics, unlike, for instance, Newtonian mechanics or special relativity or general relativity, is that there is not one satisfactory interpretation. We have the equations, we have the rules, we know how to apply the rules. The rules are extremely effective at the microscopic scale, not at the large scale, not at the low energy scale, but very, very, very efficient. But we don't have one single convincing interpretation. So the one in which the universe doesn't exist, it exists only when perceived, that's one of the many. So unlike the other theory, for instance, it could be argued that because there is not only quantum mechanics, there is also general relativity, which is separate from it, and which is also very interesting theory. So we don't have right now a theory of everything. So which one is good? You see, none of them is good. Both of them are interesting, but we don't have a good theory. So we cannot say that the universe exists only when perceived, even if we choose this interpretation of quantum mechanics. Because then quantum mechanics doesn't explain why, for instance, the time runs at a different pace if my watch is on the floor or whether my watch is on the ceiling. That there is nothing in quantum theory that explains that. Finally, I think what is interesting about quantum theory in its more recent lines of inquiry is that it seems more and more that one fundamental principle of physics, which is called the locality principle, can be put in question. And the locality principle could be described very simply by saying events happen locally at a single place at a single time. Events happen locally. If we move far beyond that, then this local event will have insignificant impact in the distance or throughout time, meaning throughout space-time. There are in quantum mechanics experimental results that challenge a little bit this locality principle. That there are elements that are non-local, meaning that when something happens here, it doesn't happen just here. It is the entire universe. We see it here, but it is the entire universe.
Is that entanglement? Is that the no?
No, not really. But it could be, for instance, if you are interested in that, you could look at the Bell theorem and the EPR paradox, and the result of the experiment conducted by aspect in France, and I think there is another guy in the US who has also verified that. But we are way beyond the scope of our.
Well, thanks for answering the question. Perhaps I took a simplistic view and just read into the results of the experiments the way I wanted to see them. And I know it's incredibly complicated, but I didn't think that the implications were as complicated. That it couldn't be debated. Outside of physicists, right?
No, it can be debated, but you have to learn the math. I don't see how the essence of quantum mechanics can be understood without the math. The notion of amplitude, if you will, that replaces the notion of probability and of quantum interference is not easy to convey without some mathematical background. Right. But it's not that important. It's about the world.
Yes, I have something that will bring it back to the scope of this gathering. I've been noticing back home some unpleasant states that probably were often buried, and it's more obvious here, but being here. Which is so with the coming of night, there's some kind of I notice in myself some kind of state of let's say sensations and like some state of like aloneness, or somehow something changes, and then also everybody goes home, and then I'm here. But it's not just here. I know it. I know this flavor back home. Back home, I go watch a movie, smoke some pot, meet some friends. Here, I choose not to do that. And I know I have the instructions what to do, and welcome it and investigate it, allow it, study it. Not identified.
No, follow your bliss, follow your...
Sorry?
Follow your bliss. Don't too much effort.
Huh.
Just why is it that the situation seems so unbearable? That's a question that you should ask yourself. In the now, in the moment itself, what is it which is so unbearable? At every moment, ask yourself, in the now, without going into the past or into the future, without pulling the skeletons out of the closets.
It's not unbearable. It's not unbearable. It's pretty bearable. It's curious that it's such a different shift. It's just unusual. The sun gets evening, and it's like a wave. It's bearable. I'm okay. I make it. I take the burn. But I'm just curious. Like, I don't know. And then I stayed last night and let it wash, no, not resist it, and sensation and also some thoughts like, oh, kind of, there's no one for me and no one here, there's some kind of lack of like relational. And then the thought came even if it were, it's still not going to last. So it's like bad either way. But I'm curious, like with this almost like solar, it's like solar powered, like I wonder, is this connected to our ancestors? Gets night and then it's like dangerous and you need a tribe or something. Anyway, aloneness. There's the flavor aloneness, some kind of melancholy, sensations connected to it, some thoughts. Definitely, it's different than the usual everyday state of being. That is shocking. It's shocking that it's different. And usually, I guess I'm doing things to it. What do you think this is, and what would you do if it were yours?
I would remind myself of the beauty of the infinite.
That's good.
Didn't you watch the movie last night?
This comes after people go and I go to the sleeping bag.
How was the movie, by the way? Did you like it? So what? Yeah.
It's still funny after 10 times.
Not enough. So now you have been initiated. Everybody has been initiated here, I hope. Otherwise, you will miss the teachings.
I know you've spoken about this at length before, but I seem to be needing to ask the question again about the exercise that we were doing today during the meditation, the yoga. Is it correct that we should not be expecting any immediate result from doing whatever it is?
Yeah, because results that are temporary are not interesting. They are just states. What is important is what happens in the long run and which is permanent, of a permanent nature.
Because what kept coming up in me is that chair over there is not breathing. The correlations of the bodily sensations that go along with breathing are still highly correlated.
Yes. That's why it's hard to discuss these exercises now. Now we are using reason, and whereas they are simply tantric tricks that aim at a certain result, and to try to explain them rationally. I mean, I can give you the rationale, behind those exercises. The goal of these exercises is to transform our perception of the world and of the body, so that the world is feel like the extension, a seamless extension of the body, to realign the way we perceive the world, to realign it with the universality of consciousness. In other words, if consciousness is universal, our consciousness, it means that our real body is the universe, and that as a result we should perceive the universe as such. And that's a perception in which there is love, you see. Mm-hmm. You see, that's where love comes into play. This universe is me. So then that is universal love. And so the various exercises, there are variations around this theme. And the goal is to uproot some patterns in the mind and in the body, patterns of separation. For instance, the pattern, this feeling that I am localized, I, consciousness, am localized in the body, is to delocalize I, to bring I to a non-local, to restore its legitimate non-local condition, natural condition, which is non-local, of consciousness, or of I. So, for instance, we often identify with the breath, and the breath is experienced as localized sensation. So what happens if we try to delocalize the breath in an external object? It is really not that possible to delocalize the sensation. But in this attempt, that which was attached, the sense of me that was attached to the breath, will detach itself. You see? So, same thing with exercises about the head. Because we usually, just as we often identify with the breath, we also often identify with the head. For instance, when we move the hand, that's the other exercise, it's easy to have the impression I'm not moving. But when we move the head, all of a sudden it seems, oh, now I am moving. What is the reason for this difference? That if we move the little finger, I'm not moving, and if I move the head, I'm moving. It can only be because I identify with some sensations in the head that have become so intimate, so that, and it is these sensations that have this special status of being me that creates a sense of separation, of course. So if I try to put my head out there, the sense of me that attaches to the head will easily be transported, because the sense of me is non-local, really. Consciousness is non-local. And I would feel these bodily sensations with which I am identifying as resistances that prevent me from doing easily this exercise. When the exercise is done easily, the sensations of the head are there, but the me is everywhere. So it's a stepping stone in this direction.
Well, so my question really is, what to do when the resistances are observed, if anything.
They are there. They are merely bodily sensations, and they are not me. I am that in which they appear.
The last step, yeah, okay.
So me remains in the space, remains non-local. It remains with the object onto which I was projecting the sense of me. The head in this case.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
But the beauty of this exercise is that they work. We don't need to go through this intellectual, lengthy and laborious attempt at explanation. We just do them the best we can, and we observe over time a change in our daily life, in the way we interact with people, with events, with objects. We feel that we are no longer in the body somehow. The body is there, we are in the body, but we are also outside of it.
Would you say that that's kind of an increase in spontaneity and a lessening of...
That too, of course, that too. But I'm
self-referencing, monitoring kind of function.
But no, it's almost physical. It's more direct. It's more immediate. It has more to do with the fact that we are not kept in a straitjacket here by bodily sensations. Bodily sensations may be there, but we are within and without them. They have lost the power to contain us.
Interesting.
We are more like the space, instead of being like objects within the space. The objects being the bodily sensations.
Okay. Thank you.
Francis, in your answer to Mihai, when you said to remind myself of the beauty of the infinite, there was an immediate melting into yes, yes. And it brought up also one of the exercises that we did, I think, on the first day when you asked us to find love, and either with a person we loved or a dog or a cat. What came up was this overflowing impersonal joyfulness. So I used that as...
Of course, but then you don't even need to use it.
Yeah, no, that's what was right there, yes. And also, I wanted to share with you a few weeks ago about what is. This had to do with what is, and perhaps wanting to change what is. And in contemplating that, there was this bursting appreciation, impersonal joyfulness at the miracle of this, whatever it is, the fact that there is something instead of nothing. And in that instant, then, there was the recognition that how then could there be me wanting anything to be any different than what it appeared? Because of that recognition of the miraculousness of it all.
Yes, but even in this, not wanting the situation to be different, meaning fully welcoming, not only accepting, but fully welcoming the situation, we have also to welcome the little inner voice who is telling us, do this or don't do that.
Yes. I remember years ago when you had said you look at everything and you include this as well.
That's very important.
Absolutely.
Because this welcoming, when it is well understood, is not solely the welcoming of external events, but it has to be a universal welcoming, which means external event, but also
this
subjective events.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And then, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Case in point, when I was a teenager, 16, 17, in my last 2 years of high school, and we'd go to the beach, and there was this cafe, so we had our cafe with the group of friends, boys and girls, and in the evening we would be there, we'd sit forever. We didn't have much money, but we order one beer or one thing, and that the beer would last for a few hours. French people understand that, and students. And but the game that was being played sometimes by my friends was to make comments about the people who were walking by. It was a beach, so people would be walking by, enjoying the evening, and about their appearance, about what. And I felt bad, but at the same time, I was fully with them, and actually I was participating in the game. I have to confess, I was also being part of this thing. But at the same time, there was something in me that I didn't feel bad. I wasn't feeling well. But I wasn't feeling well in many social circumstances. I was shy, I was not feeling too well. But then after meeting my teacher a few years later, I realized that most of my being self-conscious in social situations had disappeared. However, let's say 90%, but there were still 10% of situations in which I was not feeling well. But in fact, it was the little voice in me telling me, get the hell out of here. And I observe also, when I was with my teacher, I was observing him quite a lot. And when he was with us, a small group of close friends, he was very open, very, lot of humor, a lot of participation. But on some circumstances, I was with him. I remember having dinner with his companion at the time, and his companion's mother. And then, during this evening, he kind of disappeared in the background. He kind of faded away. He was there and not there. He was there to me because I was observing, keeping my eye on him. But he was very silent, very polite, very silent. And then the two ladies were having this ongoing conversation, rolling. But he was very, and then later on I understood, that's what he was feeling. I mean, he was obliging, to be there, but he was not taking part in the game of ignorance that was going on. You see, that was.